Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I've got a story that I believe will truly touch many of your hearts. It's a tale about buried secrets, about love, loss, and the heavy burden of lies. If you find this family drama meaningful, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Every house has its own story, and this one, my grandma's house, hid a dark secret darker than anything I could have ever imagined. Some secrets aren't buried underground, but right beneath our feet, where we feel safest. And when they're uncovered, they can tear everything apart. An old chest, a letter. And the truth about a death my entire family believed was just an accident. This is Aunt Mae's story, a true story of how family secrets haunt us. After his grandma's passing, Ethan, a young man feeling adrift in life's choices, grappling with a recent layoff from a demanding tech job and the quiet dissolution of a long-term relationship, decided to return to her old house in the suburbs to fix it up himself. He needed a fresh start, a retreat from the city's relentless pace and his own internal turmoil. The house, untouched for months, felt like a silent sanctuary, a place where time had slowed. He desperately needed a project, something tangible to ground him, to mend not just wood and plaster, but the growing cracks in his own spirit. He felt a profound sense of displacement, as if the fast-paced world he'd been part of no longer fit. Grandma's house, with its comforting silence and scent of old books and dried flowers, offered a sanctuary. "It's not just a house, you know?" He murmured to his friend, Sarah, over the phone, his voice a little hoarse, betraying his deeper turmoil. "It's like a connection, a way to remember Grandma and maybe, just maybe, find my own footing again. This house holds so many memories, Sarah. I just hope they're all good ones." He paused, a faint tremor in his voice, as if questioning his own words. He felt a deep, almost primal pull to the old structure, a sense that its quiet walls held more than just dust and time. Perhaps whispers of a past he never fully knew. This was becoming more than just a grandma's story of renovation. He thought about how Grandma Evelyn always seemed to carry a subtle, unspoken sadness, a gentle melancholy he'd never fully understood. In the rarely used attic room, piled high with forgotten treasures and dusty relics, Ethan was prying up a loose floorboard near an old, moth-eaten trunk. He'd noticed it for days, a slight give underfoot that bothered his perfectionist nature. It was almost as if something underneath was subtly pushing up, demanding to be noticed. The wood creaked, protested, then finally gave way with a groan that seemed to echo through the silence, raising the hairs on his arms. A dark void opened beneath, and he instinctively shone his phone's flashlight into the gloom. His breath hitched. Lying there, nestled in the shadows, was a small, unassuming wooden chest. It wasn't ornate or grand, just plain, dark wood, aged by time, looking as though it belonged to another era. His heart began a frantic drum against his ribs. A strange, prickling sensation ran down his spine. It was a premonition, a cold whisper telling him that this discovery was far more significant than a forgotten keepsake. This chest felt heavy, charged with an unspoken history, a silent testament to a secret long held. A hidden past waited. Ethan carefully pulled the chest up, its surface gritty with the accumulated dust of decades. The rusty lock mocked his efforts, clinging stubbornly, refusing to yield its secrets easily. He tried a few old keys he'd found in a forgotten drawer, but none fit, each click a tiny frustration. He then spotted a loose hinge, a weakness in its resolve, a tiny flaw in its aged armor. He finally forced it open with a large, rusty pair of pliers he found in Grandma's old toolbox, the metal groaning in protest. The sharp crack as the lock broke echoed in the silent attic, a sound that felt profoundly final, a seal being broken, a boundary crossed. Inside were a handful of faded banknotes, old and soft, bearing dates from decades past, their value long diminished, and a few simple, antique-looking silver trinkets, a locket with no picture, a small bracelet with a single tarnished charm. But his gaze immediately fixed on a yellowed, fragile envelope, tucked underneath everything else, almost as an afterthought. It had no address, just a single scribbled line in elegant, flowing script that looked hauntingly familiar. To whoever finds this letter, I hope you understand Auntie's choice. He recognized the handwriting instantly, a jolt of recognition hitting him in the gut so hard it made him gasp. It was Aunt Mae's. His mother's younger sister, the vibrant, artistic aunt he barely remembered from hazy childhood photos, a ghost of a smile in every image. Her tragic death in a car accident 20 years ago had always been shrouded in a quiet sorrow, a topic rarely mentioned, almost taboo, a collective grief too painful to touch. A knot tightened in his stomach. Choice? What choice? The family had always maintained it was a terrible, unforeseeable accident, a cruel twist of fate that stole her too soon. His mind raced, grasping at theories, wildly rejecting them. Could it be a hidden will? A secret love affair? A final, poignant message? But the word choice resonated, sharp and clear, hinting at something far more sinister, far more deliberate than a simple accident. A cold dread began to spread through him, chilling him to the bone, transforming his nostalgic project into something deeply personal and terrifying. This was the beginning of a real family drama, not just history. Ethan's hands trembled so violently, he almost dropped the letter, the delicate paper feeling impossibly heavy. He unfolded the brittle sheet, his eyes scanning the elegant, yet despair-filled script, each word a hammer blow to his soul, echoing in the deafening silence of the attic. The letter wasn't just a confession, it was a desperate, agonizing cry from the grave, a final, tortured plea for understanding. Date, October 14th, 2005. To dear Ethan, if you are reading these words, I am probably no longer here. My family will tell you that I died in an accident. Don't believe them. It wasn't an accident. It was a release, a final act of reclaiming what little dignity I had left, a desperate escape from a life that had become an unbearable prison. Aunt Me's words painted a vivid, agonizing picture of her final days, a descent into a hellish despair. She detailed the relentless, psychological warfare waged by Aunt Clara, his mother's older sister, a woman always known for her sharp wit and even sharper ambition, often subtly condescending and dismissive towards Me's artistic dreams. Clara, it turned out, had plunged into massive gambling debts, a secret obsession she'd hidden for years, systematically leveraging their family's meager savings, Grandma Evelyn's modest retirement fund, and even Aunt Me's small inheritance from their grandfather. Me had been coerced, blackmailed even, into a shady business deal, an elaborate embezzlement scheme within the very family business they all relied on, meant to cover Clara's tracks, a dark secret that threatened to consume them all. When I, consumed by guilt and terror of exposure, tried to back out, Aunt Clara unleashed a torrent of terrifying threats. The letter continued, each word a fresh cut. Not just financial ruin for me, but public humiliation for our entire family, dragging their good name through every tabloid in town, fabricating stories, destroying reputations. She even threatened to frame me for much larger crimes, to make sure I spent the rest of my life in jail. I couldn't live with the shame, the guilt. Not just for myself, but for the indelible stain it would leave on our family's honor, on Mom and Dad's legacy. The letter read, the desperation almost palpable. They killed my soul before I ended my life. I had to do it to protect what little was left, to save the family from utter disgrace. I staged the accident to spare my parents, to give them a narrative they could bear, a tragic accident instead of a public scandal. I'm sorry for causing everyone pain, but I had no other choice. It was either my life or our family's ruin. Tell them. Tell them the truth, Ethan. Please, let my death mean something. Let it be the key that unlocks the cage of lies this family built around itself. Ethan let the letter fall to the dusty floor, its pages scattering like broken fragments of his world. He staggered back, crashing into a stack of old boxes, the resounding thud echoing his inner turmoil, the shattering of everything he believed. Number no, no, no. He screamed, his voice raw, hoarse, echoing in the confined space, filled with disbelief and anguish. Tears streamed down his face, hot and bitter, fueled by a furious, burning rage that threatened to consume him. Rage at Aunt Clara's monstrous cruelty, rage at Aunt Me's unbearable pain, and most profoundly, rage at his entire family for complicity, for their chilling silence, for burying this horrific truth for 2 decades under a veneer of respectability. The accident was a meticulously crafted lie, a desperate attempt to protect their precious reputation, their carefully constructed image of perfection. Ethan's stomach churned with a nauseating sense of betrayal, a feeling that permeated every memory, every family photo. Every family gathering, every quiet mention of Aunt Me's tragic passing now felt like a grotesque mockery, a charade he'd unknowingly been a part of. He felt sick to his core, wrestling with a monumental moral dilemma: expose the truth and shatter his family beyond repair, or keep the secret and betray Aunt Me's dying wish, allowing her suffering to be in vain. This was the ultimate family secret, a wound festering for generations. The initial shock and rage, though still simmering, gradually coalesced into a cold, unwavering determination. Ethan had to unearth every last detail, every hidden corner of this family tragedy. He felt compelled, not just for me, but for himself, to truly understand the depths of this deception. He pored over old family photo albums, his eyes now seeing what they had been blind to before, reinterpreting every smile, every averted gaze. In a faded snapshot from a family gathering long ago, a picnic at the lake, Me's favorite spot, Aunt Me stood at the edge of the frame, her smile brittle, almost a grimace. Her eyes, usually so lively, now distant and filled with a haunted sorrow. Her gaze seemed fixed on Aunt Clara, who was front and center, laughing boisterously, seemingly oblivious, holding court, basking in the family's attention. It wasn't the look of a happy person, but rather one on the very brink of despair, a silent scream frozen in time. He remembered a fleeting conversation with Grandma Evelyn, just weeks before she passed, where she'd gripped his hand tightly, her eyes filled with an uncharacteristic urgency. Some things, she'd whispered, are best left undisturbed, Ethan, but sometimes the buried truth needs air to breathe. Had she been trying to tell him something? He found Grandma Evelyn's old leather-bound journal, hidden beneath a pile of quilts in her cedar chest, its pages brittle with age. Among fragmented entries, one line chilled him to the bone, dated just weeks before Me's death. Me is so fragile, poor girl, this burden, it will break her. Clara, what have you done? God forgive us all. Grandma knew. The thought sent a fresh wave of despair through him. Had she been powerless to intervene, crushed by Clara's will? Or had she too been complicit, choosing the family's manufactured peace over truth? The idea that his beloved grandma could have held such a secret, allowed such injustice, was almost as devastating as Clara's actions. He began making phone calls, carefully probing, his voice casual, almost too casual, searching for cracks in the family's united front. He talked to his mother, Eleanor, his uncle George, and Aunt Rose, trying to subtly bring up Aunt Me and her death. His mother, Eleanor, would always change the subject abruptly, her voice tight, a flicker of pain in her eyes. It was a tragedy, Ethan, best left in the past. It still hurts too much. There was an unspoken plea in her words, a desire to keep the lid on the past. Uncle George, ever the pragmatist, would mutter, "What's done is done." No point stirring up old ghosts. We moved on for a reason, for the family's sake. His pragmatism felt like complicity now. Only Aunt Rose, his mother's and Aunt Me's youngest sister, seemed to hesitate, her eyes clouding with an unspoken grief, a yearning for truth. Poor me, she'd sigh, her voice barely a whisper, she had it rough. There was a lot going on, more than you know, a darkness. Her evasiveness, their palpable discomfort, only solidified Ethan's suspicions. He felt like he was walking through a psychological minefield, where every subtle shift in tone, every averted gaze, was a crucial clue, hinting at the vast, unspoken web of secrets that bound his family. The more he learned, the heavier the burden of knowledge became, and the more he dreaded the inevitable confrontation. The weight of his discovery was crushing. The raw confession from Aunt Clara, though shattering, left a void. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling there was more to her desperation, a deeper root to her gambling addiction and her ruthlessness. He began to discreetly ask other relatives, less directly involved, about Aunt Clara's younger years, her early struggles, the pressures she faced. He found an old family friend, Martha, who remembered Clara before she became the formidable businesswoman, a woman desperate for validation. Clara? She was always fiercely ambitious, driven, Martha recalled over a hesitant phone call, her voice tinged with a blend of admiration and sadness. But there was a vulnerability too, a deep insecurity that simmered beneath her bravado. Her father, your great grandfather, a stern and unforgiving man, he was always harsh with her, never thought she was good enough, always comparing her to her perfect older brother who died young. He refused to support her business ventures, told her women belonged in the home, that she'd never amount to anything significant. I think that planted a seed in her. Ethan, Martha continued, her voice softer. A desperate need to prove him wrong, to succeed at any cost, even if it meant cutting corners, pushing boundaries. And when the gambling started, it wasn't just about money. It was her way of chasing that elusive win, that feeling of control and validation she never had growing up. She thought if she could just win big, she'd finally be worthy. Ethan listened, a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. He still condemned Aunt Clara's monstrous actions, the cruel path that led to Me's death, but now he understood the twisted roots that fed her desperation. It didn't excuse her, not in the slightest, but it added a tragic, almost pathetic, layer to her villainy. She wasn't just a monster. She was a product of her own pain, trapped in a relentless, self-destructive cycle of proving her worth, always chasing a ghost of approval. This deeper understanding made the upcoming family confrontation even more fraught, knowing he wasn't just exposing a crime, but peeling back layers of intergenerational trauma, of a family legacy riddled with unspoken hurts and impossible expectations. The realization that even perpetrators could be victims, in their own twisted way, of their own pasts and insecurities, was a heavy burden for Ethan to bear. It revealed the true, sprawling depth of this family tragedy. It wasn't just about me and Clara. It was about the silent wounds passed down through generations. Unable to stomach the deceit any longer, the weight of Aunt Me's letter burning in his pocket, a silent demand for justice, Ethan decided to confront Aunt Clara directly. He arranged to meet her at a secluded cafe, choosing a quiet corner where their inevitable explosion wouldn't draw too much attention, hoping for a private reckoning. Aunt Clara, always impeccably dressed, radiating her usual confident aura, walked in. But Ethan noticed it immediately, a faint tremor in her usually steady hands as she accepted her coffee, a subtle tightness around her eyes. She knew, "What's so important that you needed to meet me, Ethan?" she asked, her eyes sharp, though a flicker of guardedness, a hint of fear, danced within them. Her composure was almost unsettling, a mask perfectly sculpted. Ethan didn't mince words. He placed Aunt Me's faded letter on the table, sliding it across to her. His voice was cold, razor sharp, cutting through the polite cafe murmur, commanding attention. "Aunt Clara, do you recognize this handwriting?" The smile on Aunt Clara's face evaporated instantly, replaced by a mask of sheer terror. Her hand trembled violently as she picked up the letter, her eyes darting over the familiar script, her face draining of color. Panic flared in her gaze, a raw animal fear, cornered and exposed. This isn't real. Where did this come from?" She stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust before his eyes. "I found it under the floorboards at Grandma's house." "Aunt Me left it," Ethan said, his voice laced with controlled venom, each word deliberate, calculated. "Auntie didn't die in an accident, did she, Aunt Clara? She ended her own life, driven to it by you. Tell me what happened." Aunt Clara suddenly pushed back from the table, nearly overturning her coffee, scrambling for an escape that wasn't there. "Ethan, what are you saying? Are you insane?" "It was an accident, a tragic accident, nothing more." Her voice rose, shrill and defensive, a desperate, futile attempt to maintain control. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room, seeking an ally, a way out. "Insane. Then why does this letter explicitly state Aunt Me took her own life because of the relentless pressure you put on her? Because of the debt you forced her to bear? Because of your threats to expose her, to ruin her, to destroy this family's reputation?" Ethan pressed, his voice rising, each word a direct, undeniable accusation, hitting their mark with devastating precision. "What did you do, Aunt Clara? What exactly did you do to Aunt Me?" "The truth, Aunt Clara, now." Aunt Clara's eyes, now bloodshot and brimming with tears, darted wildly, searching for an escape, a denial that would stick. But there was none left. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. She finally slumped back into her chair, covering her face with trembling hands, breaking into uncontrolled, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this. I was desperate back then. The gambling debts, they were crushing me. I lost everything." Me kept refusing to go along with it. She had a conscience, a strong one. "I said terrible things. I threatened everything she held dear. I never thought she would actually do it. I needed the money. Ethan, I was drowning. I didn't see any other way out. Oh God, I'm so sorry." Her confession came out in choked gasps, a torrent of long suppressed guilt and fear, mixed with a desperate plea for understanding, perhaps even forgiveness from the nephew whose face was etched with disgust. She recounted the agonizing details, the specific threats, the days leading up to Me's death, revealing a level of manipulation and desperation that chilled Ethan to the bone. The raw, gut-wrenching pain in her voice was undeniable, a testament to her own suffering, but it couldn't fully obscure the monstrousness of her actions, leaving Ethan torn between a flicker of pity for her past and utter disgust for what she had become. This was the moment the hidden truth of the family drama came crashing down, a raw, exposed wound. Ethan called a family meeting at Grandma's house, a silent command in his voice that left no room for refusal. The air in the living room was thick with unspoken tension, heavy with the weight of generations of untold stories, a pressure cooker ready to explode. He had asked Aunt Clara to be there, and she sat rigidly, her face pale, eyes downcast, anticipating the storm she knew was coming. Ethan placed Aunt Me's faded letter on the antique coffee table, along with the other fragmented pieces of evidence he'd painstakingly gathered. A loan document with Me's forged signature, an old, cryptic phone bill with suspicious long distance calls to bookies, printouts of financial records showing Clara's massive losses. Everyone, he began, his voice surprisingly steady, though his hands clenched under the table, holding tightly onto a small, smooth river stone he'd picked up. I have something I need to tell you. This has been kept secret for far too long, and it's time it came to light for Aunt Me's sake and for all of us. As he read Aunt Me's words aloud, each sentence landing like a physical blow, his mother, Alina, Uncle George, and Aunt Rose were utterly stunned. The initial shock slowly morphed into disbelief, then searing pain. His mother crumpled, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering, "My poor me, my poor sister, what did we do?" over and over. Uncle George's face went ashen, his usual stoicism replaced by sheer disbelief, then a growing fury that seemed to consume him. Aunt Rose gasped, covering her mouth in horror, tears streaming down her face for a sister she knew was troubled but never truly understood why, a pain she'd carried for decades without knowing its true source. Aunt Clara sat rigidly, head bowed, her body trembling, unable to meet anyone's gaze, the weight of her secret finally crushing her. "No, this is a lie. Me died in an accident. We buried her." Uncle Bob, another uncle, suddenly roared, his face contorted in denial and rage, leaping to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at Ethan. "You're trying to destroy this family, Ethan. How dare you bring this filth here? A lie." Ethan's voice cut through the noise, filled with righteous anger. "Then why couldn't Aunt Clara look me in the eye when I asked about Aunt Me? Why did Mom always change the subject, her voice cracking with unspoken grief? Why was Aunt Rose always so sad, so haunted when Aunt Me was mentioned?" He turned, his eyes burning with accusation as he looked directly at Aunt Clara. "And Aunt Clara, tell them what you did. Tell them why Me was driven to this. Tell them the truth, the whole truth now." The meeting erupted into a cacophony of shouts, accusations, and wrenching tears. Raw emotions, bottled up for 2 decades, finally burst forth like a dam breaking. Betrayal, anger, sorrow, confusion, they swirled in the small living room, ripping apart the fabric of their family. His mother cried out in anguish, realizing her beloved sister's death was not fate, but the direct result of her own sister's greed and cruelty. Uncle George, who prided himself on the family's honorable name, felt deeply shamed and betrayed, his face twisting in disgust towards Clara. The family's carefully constructed image lay in tatters. Aunt Clara wailed, pleading for forgiveness, her words desperate and incoherent, trying to explain her past, but they were drowned out by the family's collective rage and profound disappointment. Some family members stormed out, unable to bear the weight of the revelation. The family fractured before Ethan's eyes, descending into a painful abyss of broken trust and shattered illusions. The illusion of their happy, functional family lay in ruins, exposed for the fragile, deceitful construct it had always been. The air crackled with bitterness, and Ethan felt the immense weight of the family's pain, knowing he had caused it, but also knowing it was the only path forward. This was the raw, emotional core of their family drama, a wound that would take generations to heal. The silence that followed the storm felt heavier than the screams. The immediate aftermath of the family revelation left Ethan utterly drained, a profound emptiness settling in his chest. Yet paradoxically, in the quiet days that followed, a strange clarity began to emerge from the chaos. The emotional fallout was immense, but through it, he saw his family stripped bare of their pretense, raw and vulnerable, perhaps for the first time. He felt the crushing weight of their pain, but also the first hesitant stirrings of hope for genuine connection, for a foundation built on honesty, not illusion. His initial motivation to fix his grandmother's house had been about escaping his own aimlessness, a superficial fix for a deep-seated uncertainty. But this journey had forced him to confront something far deeper: the unspoken truths that shape who we are, the insidious ways secrets can rot a family from within. He spent days alone in the old house, the silence no longer foreboding but contemplative, almost therapeutic. He reflected on his own life. His recent layoff hadn't just been a setback, but a desperate escape from a corporate career he never truly loved, a path chosen out of expectation, not passion. His broken relationship had been stifled by his own inability to truly connect, to be vulnerable, to share his authentic self. He realized that for so long, he had avoided his own emotional floorboards, preferring to skim the surface to maintain a comfortable facade, much like his family had done with Aunt Mae's death. The courage it took to expose the family secret had ignited a dormant strength within him, a sense of purpose he'd never known. He wasn't just a restorer of old houses. He was an unearther of truth, a facilitator of healing, a reluctant catalyst for change. He began to research family therapy, ways to help fractured families rebuild, focusing on intergenerational trauma and communication. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with more questions than answers, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose, a calling that transcended personal ambition. This was more than just fixing a house. It was about healing a legacy, about honoring Aunt Me's sacrifice, and finding his own place in a newly redefined family. It was his own personal journey through a dark family secret. Months turned into a year. The initial shock and fury within the family slowly gave way to a weary, painful grief, and then, for some, a fragile desire to mend. The wounds were deep, but the exposure had allowed them to begin to breathe, to slowly, painfully scab over. Aunt Clara faced the devastating reality of ostracism from some family members, particularly Uncle Bob, who remained unforgiving, unable to reconcile the sister he knew with the monster her actions revealed. Consumed by guilt and haunted by Me's ghost, she had plunged into deep depression and finally, grudgingly, sought intensive psychological help. She began a difficult, isolated journey of self-reflection and desperate attempts to atone, sending handwritten letters of apology, making small, almost imperceptible gestures of remorse. Ethan realized that exposing the truth wasn't about seeking vengeance. It was about liberation, a necessary, painful surgery to remove a long festering infection that had poisoned their family for decades. He facilitated a few therapy sessions where his mother, Eleanor, and Aunt Rose tentatively began to address the trauma, finding solace in shared grief and newfound honesty. He spent more time at Grandma's house, continuing the renovations, but now with a different, more profound purpose. The house was no longer a tomb of dark secrets, but a space for truth, for slowly healing wounds, a living testament to their painful past and their fragile future. He felt a newfound connection to Aunt Mee, as if her spirit rested easier knowing her truth was finally out, her sacrifice acknowledged. One quiet afternoon, while clearing out Grandma's old wardrobe, he found another small, hidden box, nestled deep within a stack of old linens. Inside was a smaller, more intimate diary belonging to Aunt Mee from her last days. It wasn't the despair of the letter, but small, hopeful thoughts, reflections on her art, her love for sunsets, and a final, poignant entry dated the day before her death. No matter how difficult life gets, people must live truthfully. Only truth brings peace. And perhaps one day my truth will set someone free. Maybe even Clara. He took this diary to his mother, Eleanor. She read it, tears streaming, but these were no longer tears of shock or anger. They were tears of profound understanding, of empathy, and of a quiet, aching love for her lost sister, a sister she was finally beginning to truly see. A sense of peace, fragile but real, began to settle in her eyes. Slowly, hesitantly, his mother and Aunt Clara began to speak again, their conversations awkward at first, filled with unspoken pain, but gradually softening, moving towards tentative reconciliation. It wasn't full forgiveness, not yet, but a painful step towards understanding. Aunt Rose reached out to Ethan, expressing her gratitude, acknowledging the immense courage it took to reveal such a painful truth. The healing process was agonizingly slow, a long and winding road, but it was happening, one difficult conversation, one small act of empathy at a time. Ethan understood that truth, however devastating, was the only foundation upon which family trust and love could ever be truly rebuilt. His own personal journey of finding footing had found its unexpected conclusion in this revelation. He had found his purpose not in a career, but in facilitating the healing of his family. The journey was far from over, but at least now they were walking towards the light together. This was the true inheritance from his grandma's house. The truth has been revealed not to punish, but to heal. My family went through a storm, a devastating earthquake that shook us to our core, but now we're learning to face it together. This house, once a place that harbored a terrible secret, a monument to a buried lie, has now become a symbol of a new beginning, of painful but necessary forgiveness, and of the profound courage it takes to heal. The chest beneath the floorboards contain not just tragedy, but an invaluable lesson. The burden of lies is infinitely heavier than the burden of truth. Aunt Me left behind not just a suicide letter, but a legacy of honesty, of daring to face unimaginable pain to find true peace, even in death. Her final wish to reveal the truth has finally brought a chance for genuine healing to our broken family. Perhaps in her death, she found her ultimate form of Grandma's revenge, not of malice, but of truth bringing light. Always face the truth, no matter how difficult or destructive it may seem. Because only when the truth is revealed fully and bravely can wounds truly begin to heal, can genuine peace take root, and can we find forgiveness, not just for others, but for ourselves. Don't let buried secrets fester and rot your soul and the souls of those around you. The path to freedom is paved with honesty. Thank you for listening to my story. It's a deeply personal one, and I hope it has given you something profound to ponder. If you found this emotional story meaningful, if it resonated with you, please share this family